Like, she wanted to script your
A little
conversations.
bit, yes. Not like, yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
Like curated.
Yes, a little bit, yeah.
Shayne from Love is Blind finally shares his side of the story and speaks on all of the Natalie and Shania drama. Hey guys, and welcome back to another shared news. We've got some Love is Blind tea to get into today, but before we get into it, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Zachary Reality, joined by Gianna Gravalese and Allison Van Dam. And guys, we're still talking about the Love is Blind drama. We were captivated by season 2. Gianna, are you surprised that we're still talking about things? I mean, Shayne just went on a podcast.
No, not at all. I mean, so much happened. And I feel like it's interesting to compare season 2 to season 1, right? Because season 1, there weren't as many people watching. The show wasn't as big as it is now. And the couples, they weren't really that dramatic, I feel like. And the plot lines weren't as dramatic as season 2. So season 2 was on a whole other level. And so many people were into the season. So I think we're never going to stop talking about Love is Blind ever. And we have the 3rd season coming, and we also have a 4th and 5th season to look forward to in the future as well. So I don't think Love is Blind talk is ever going to slow down. And I'm honestly here for it. I love it.
Yeah, well, Shayne, he decided to go on Nick Vial's podcast, The Viall Files, and he finally shared his side of the story on Love is Blind and the Natalie drama. He's been teasing coming on this podcast for quite a few weeks, and he really wanted to start off by clearing the air that he has severe ADHD, so the pods drove him crazy being, kind of stuck in quarantine in there, and he also wanted to clear up that he didn't do drugs during the season. As far as his past, we're not going to get into it. He's just talking about the season. Allison, what are your kind of overall thoughts on Shayne as a person versus like his character on the show?
Shayne as a person, I think, is really he entered the room feeling very like he wanted to get things off his chest. He was an open book. He was very transparent. And I definitely believed him of when he was talking about the fact that, he has severe ADHD and then you're not locked, but, in these pods for 3 more hours at a time, that's going to drive anyone crazy. And he even said on the podcast, I did a lot better when we were back in Chicago, when I was living my normal life, when I wasn't, stuck in these rooms just thinking about all this nonstop. And I think we can probably all relate to that. If we probably wouldn't have our best sides shown on the show if we were trapped in a little box for several hours at a given time. But yeah, I don't know. I think he definitely came on wanting to clear the air and hopefully put some rumors to rest about himself. And I think we've seen it with Bachelor Nation. We've seen it with other reality shows. People see things on a TV show and they just kind of run with them. So I think everyone should have their time and their space to speak their piece. Does that mean everything was correct or right? We don't know. But, I'm happy that he got his chance to say what he needed and wanted to say.
Yeah, because he hasn't done any interviews since the show, but the only really time we heard from him was during the reunion where he was able to put closure on his relationship with Natalie. But Natalie has done so many interviews since the show while Shayne hasn't been able to. So this was his opportunity to really say everything he had to say. And that's exactly what he did. So let's kind of get into what he said on the Viall Files podcast. He says he didn't sleep for 2 days before the wedding. The Bachelor and the Bachelorette parties were supposed to be separate, but the girls crashed the guys' bachelor party, which is where Natalie saw him getting drunk 2 nights before the wedding. And Shayne says that's what people do at a bachelor party. They get drunk before their wedding. Now, there was weeks of buildup between Natalie and Shayne. They were fighting a lot. They were arguing, and, Shayne just got really upset because he felt like Natalie was picking at him for everything he did wrong instead of kind of, saying, you did this great, or it was just like a lot of picking and nitpicking, and that's kind of what he felt. He felt like he was being judged in the relationship, and he even went one step further to say Natalie would act differently on camera. She wanted to curate the conversations and kind of almost self-produced the storylines once they got back to Chicago.
So, like, Natalie wanted, like, a pre-film
Technically, yes.
breakdown. What should we, like, she wanted to script your conversations.
A little bit, yes. Not like, yeah, to a certain extent, yeah.
Like curated.
Yes, a little bit, yeah.
We're going to get into a little bit more, but Gianna, what were your thoughts hearing that?
I just think it's so interesting. There are always two sides to every story, right? Like big reminder. So this is just Shayne's side of the story. I believe that he probably didn't sleep because he was probably so stressed. They probably didn't even have time to sleep. Of course, bachelorette parties are all about partying and drinking and having a good time. Um, I guess I can understand a little bit of Natalie like calling him out for being really, really drunk, like especially if they got in that big fight that what they were talking
Mhm.
about at the reunion, if there were some words going back and forth, which he said while he was drunk, I can kind of understand that. But I also can understand why Shayne was irritated with Natalie constantly like nitpicking him because it's like if you're gonna be with someone for as a lifelong partner, you don't want someone that's constantly seeing the bad in you or constantly trying to change you. You want someone that's going to see the good in you and like accept you for who you are. So, if that is true, if that was the case, if Natalie was actually doing that, I can totally see his point. And then, in terms of Natalie acting different on camera and trying to curate the conversations, I feel like, in a way, we all know how reality TV works. We know that producers try to manipulate things and try to get things to happen. And I think that she probably wanted to try to keep it as natural and real as possible. And she was probably trying to help Shayne like not fall for trick interview questions or try to help him
Ooh.
not get edited in a bad light. Because I feel like that's what I would be doing myself. Like I'd be the one trying to self produce how things go down, especially if a producer was like, "Oh, Natalie, say this or do this," and then Natalie was like, "I'm actually going to say or do this instead." And again, I am talking all hypothetical here, just because I'm trying to see both sides of the story, so I can see where they're both coming from in that aspect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because in one aspect, it's like Natalie chose Shayne. She accepted the proposal. She agreed to date him and, be engaged to him after the show, after they left the pods. And Shayne was just explaining that he is who he is. So if Natalie had all these issues with him and was trying to change him, then it's just not fair that they would continue to date each other and even get engaged in the first place if she was going to be so nitpicky. So that's kind of where Shayne was coming from. And that's why I don't think they're meant to be together because they have such different personalities and they're from two different worlds. And we're going to get into it a little bit more, but we have to talk a little bit about the Shayna of it all because Natalie was supposed to have this conversation with Shayna, but Shayne says Natalie ran away, like quite literally ran away. So Shayna and Shayne, we know what that happened in the pods. They kind of had a connection, and Shayna and Shayne only hung out one time, as Shayne says, in a group setting post show. Shayne says they made Natalie, look like she was, America's sweetheart, but she was actually really jealous of, of his connection with Shayna. And Natalie actually addressed this on her Instagram. We're going to get into more of her statement, but what she said about the Shayna situation is that she actually did have a conversation with Shayna on the beach, but it didn't air. So, Allison, where do we stand on this? Because we are getting two very different sides of the story in regards to Shayna.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part because it's like, who do you believe? If we didn't see the footage, then it's just a he said she said at this point. I think the one of the biggest takeaways I had from the podcast and the conversation between Nick and Shayne was the fact that like he kind of played by production's rules and producers' rules. And I feel like Nick really pushed against that because in Nick's experience, he was on several seasons of The Bachelor. He said himself that by the time it was his season, he was friends with the producers. He kind of got the gist. They had almost like strategic meetings together and talked about where his season was going to go. And so I think Nick was pushing him of, why didn't you say no to these things? Why didn't, and he was like, well, I'd probably have a lawsuit on my hands and I'd probably X, Y, and Z. And so I think he
Uh-huh.
he genuinely was like, no, I agreed to be on a show. I'm going to be on the show. I'm going to do what they want me to do. And maybe Natalie was more of the Nick of the situation of, I know I agreed to be on the show, but it's still my life and I'm an individual. So I'm going to still say what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with. And maybe that's where, a lot of these different stories and a lot of these different perspectives are coming from because Shayne, I could see from Shayne's perspective of him being frustrated with, no, you don't understand. We both agreed to do this. I'm being vulnerable. I'm sharing
Mhm.
everything. You should be doing the same. I can also see it from Natalie's perspective. She mentioned, I have a family that I was trying to protect, and I didn't want to disclose all of this because of them and because of, it being such a public platform. So I feel like that's where a lot of this tension stemmed from, and probably why they've both chosen to speak out and kind of say different things about each other, because they had very different perspectives while on and while after the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Gianna, do you think Natalie and Shayna ever kind of got that closure, or do we think that she really ran from the conversation like Shayne is alleging?
Those are two polar opposite stories, right? We have Shane saying that Natalie literally ran and didn't have a conversation. And then we have Natalie saying that there was indeed a conversation. So it's like, how long was the conversation? What was even said? Was it before Shane and Shayna spoke on the beach, or was it after? Like, when was the conversation? And who initiated the conversation? There's so many questions left unanswered about this alleged conversation between Natalie and Shayna. I do feel like they had some closure because there was nothing brought up at the reunion special. They were sitting next to each other and they were fine. And it seems like all the girls are okay with each other. And Shayna's now engaged, so she's completely moved on
Mhm.
from all of this situation. So we haven't heard anything from her either in regards to anything that happened. But I don't think Natalie and Shayna have any bad blood, so I can just assume that they had a conversation about what was happening. I do feel like Shayna would be one to be like, no, I don't care. Like, he's yours now. I don't care. I don't care. Because we saw her flat out lie to Kyle, who she was with. And then we
Mhm.
also saw her go up to Shane and be like, oh, you and your fake relationship, like, you're in a fake relationship. And I feel like she's very dramatic when it comes to all of that. So I can totally see her going up to Natalie and be like, no, we're good. Like, we're totally good. Like, super fake type of thing. But again, we'll never know what happened because the conversation didn't air. Netflix, release the footage.
We need a deleted scene ASAP, and maybe we'll get some more answers on After the Altar, which we're going to give our predictions to in just a few. But it feels like, podcasts are meant to kind of get answers to our questions. And now we have more questions because Shane and Natalie are saying different things. Now, more of what Shane said is that he was the one that wanted to call off the engagement 2 nights before the wedding because he felt like he was never going to be good enough for her. They then reconnected the night before the wedding, and he said he really did want to marry her. Shane has proof that Natalie wishes she said yes to the wedding, and that Natalie was milking everything she could. Shane literally said he has video proof of Natalie saying that she would have said yes, and Nick was like, delete that. That's petty. That is ridiculous. Now, Shane also expressed that he was upset that Natalie never stuck up for him because he was getting dragged on social media and getting a lot of backlash online. And since Natalie was his best friend during the journey and she was getting such a good edit and she was getting such love from all the fans, he was upset that she never, tried to help him. It kind of seemed like she was just trying to let him get buried. So, Allison, where do you think Natalie could have maybe, done anything to help Shane, especially if they weren't together at the time? Like, how much was it her place to defend Shane? He ultimately is responsible for what he does and says on the show.
I don't know. I think it's tricky because, again, yeah, everyone kind of has to stand on their own 2 feet and be responsible for what they did and what they said on the show. Again, like as we discuss with any show we cover, editing can play a huge factor in it. And I can only think that, maybe if she didn't come to his defense, that means that she didn't necessarily disagree with the comments. But I don't know because
True.
it's like maybe if she had said anything, it would be too defensive. Like with the internet now, you're gonna get slammed, I think, for anything you do. So maybe she just thought that by taking a neutral, almost silent, position, that would be the most helpful for both her and Shane. I don't know, but I can definitely see Shane's frustration of if you were engaged to someone and you thought that you were like still on pretty good terms, you would want them to come to your defense, but maybe it's just a sign that maybe they weren't on as good of terms as he even thought they were.
They definitely weren't because, as Shane mentioned, they got back together, then they broke up. They tried to make things work 4 times, he said, after the show, once it stopped filming.
We have such good times. We have such good times. And that's also why we've reconnected
What?
4 times after the show.
Well,
We tried 4 times.
Four times.
Yes, and just recently this past weekend.
Okay, because
He also said Natalie was, liking some petty comments. So, it sounds like Shayne is kind of petty, and it sounds like Natalie might be a little petty too, which is what happens when you get in a toxic relationship. So that's why I think both of them are much better off apart. Now, Shayne kind of said everything he had to say on the podcast. You guys can listen to it at the Viall Files if you want the whole thing. But Natalie has a response she took to her Instagram story because she wanted to clear up a few things that Shayne said that might not be super accurate. She says she never told Shayne what to say and they never planned out scenes beforehand. All she ever asked of him was to not drink before they had to do serious scenes and to not share details about them being intimate out of respect for her family. She says she was mad at Shayne that day because he said something negative about her behind her back. She called Shayne disgusting on the Sunday night before. He called her and said he was going to bury her and drag her down because she didn't speak highly of him in the media. On Sunday, Shayne told her he was going to bury her and drag her on the podcast because she didn't reconcile and didn't highlight enough about him in the media. And a major factor in their breakup is that she found very flirtatious messages between him and other women, and she has not been able to get over it. And that's why she never ended up getting back together with him or reconciling with him. And she says they only dated twice after their wedding, not 4 times. But we know they were just spotted over the weekend, only a few days ago in Chicago. So maybe Shayne was counting that as an extra time. Gianna, what did you think of Natalie's statement? Because it sounds like she's putting a lot of things into perspective. And she also says she's really sad that she had to kind of address it like this.
Yeah, I know that this statement was just like a quick, kind of long Instagram story, and I'm sure she's going to go more in depth. I mean, we could have a whole Natalie response podcast after everything it sounds like she's alleging. So it does make sense. I'm starting to believe her a little more just because she said, all she did ever ask, she's acknowledging that she actually did ask him to do something, was that she just didn't want him to drink before the serious scenes. And they didn't want to talk about being intimate because she knew that her family would be watching it back. And that's just weird. And I can totally agree. I would not want to be on a reality show talking about my sex life and have my dad watch it because that's just awkward. So I can totally see her point about that. And then I can also understand her being mad at Shayne because him like talking about her behind her back. I'm wondering what he even said. And the fact that Shayne called her on Sunday and was basically threatening her and being like, I'm going to drag you down on this podcast because you're rude. Like, that just kind of shows his psycho too. Now, Natalie could also be a little bit of psycho in her own realm as well. But again, we clearly don't know. I just think that to hear Natalie's side after this is eye-opening because it's, again, polar opposite from what Shayne was even saying. And the fact that she's saying they dated only twice after the wedding too, it's like there's so many like mismatched parts of the story. And I'm interested to hear her elaborate on it. I'm really hoping that she goes more into depth.
Yeah, absolutely, because this drama is just still going on between the two of them. Now, there is some rumors that Shayne may or may not have went on another reality show, which kind of postponed his time that he was able to do a podcast and share his side of the story. So, Allison, do we think that could be playing into why they still have drama to this day? Or do we think that this is just a toxic couple? Because all of the other Love is Blind couples seem to kind of sort out their drama already. And we're not still talking about them, but we're certainly still talking about Natalie and Shayne.
Yeah, I don't know why it feels like it's still this will they, won't they, back together, no, they're not. And it's clear that they both just need to kind of step away from it. It would make sense if he did go off and film something else, maybe they didn't have time to kind of put it all to rest like the other couples did. I mean, didn't Mallory say that she went on another date, even after the cameras stopped filming just to like feel it out? Maybe they didn't have time to do that because if he jetted off to do another job, it was kind of just left as a question mark. So maybe if they had just had time directly after, like the other couples did, it would have been easier. But then again, maybe it's just the combination of their personalities and kind of their tempers that this would have been happening regardless of any other gigs that they booked.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, the two of them, It's just a lot of drama. Maybe it's put to bed now that they both share their sides of the story, or maybe this is going to reignite things. We know they were following each other, then unfollowing each other on Instagram. You know, Shayne says that the cast is drama. You know, they hang out all the time. Most of them take Natalie's side, but he does say he likes Nick and Danielle as well as Jarrette. And Danielle also confirmed to us on her Instagram stories that After the Altar is coming soon, and she cannot wait for everyone to see it. Netflix did reveal After the Altar will come probably in a few months before Love is Blind season 3 comes, where they focused on couples in Dallas, and that will be coming later in the year. But we got to talk about what could come on After the Altar, because maybe Natalie and Shayne will have to discuss more of their drama on that as well. Gianna, what are your predictions for After the Altar? What are you looking forward to seeing?
Oh, why do I feel like Natalie and Shayne aren't even going to have a single conversation during After the Altar? Because after everything he said and after everything she said, taking into account that they had already filmed the show, it seems like they haven't talked about literally anything because they're on two completely different pages. And I hope that's not the case because that'll just be such a letdown and like so anticlimactic because they're the couple that everyone's focusing on pretty much. I do hope that Kyle and DP walk in arm in arm, hand in hand. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I do think Nick and Danielle will be the couple to host because, as we know from season 1, there was one couple that hosted the party. And I could totally see them doing that with their costumes and drum set video game thing going on. Um, but yeah, I hope that After the Altar in general does come soon. I know that the last one premiered this past August. So if they're going to stay on the same timeline, let's look at summer for that, which will be great. It'll be something we can all look forward to. Um, and yeah, I last note, I guess, hot take. I think it's interesting that Shayne is saying the cast is all drama. They're all drama and they all take Natalie's side. Like, honey, you're the only drama that we're really seeing, you and Natalie. And the fact that they're all taking Natalie's side and they were there with the both of you kind of says a lot to me, especially because I really think all the other couples have a good sense of character considering that they are all engaged and found their person. So the fact that they're siding with Natalie just means I think I'm going to have to side with Natalie if I had to choose. So we'll see.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are split online after Shayne revealed all, but we might get some Shayna in the After the Altar as well. So, Allison, where do we think Shayna is gonna, play a part into this? Is she still gonna be getting involved in drama between them, or is she gonna be off doing her own thing?
I really think that she's going to be doing her own thing. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we saw her new relationship or maybe her engagement at After the Altar. And maybe if they do another party like we did in season 1, she brings her fiance as her date. I think definitely Natalie and Shayne are still going to be having drama. I'm with Gianna. I want to see Deep D and Kyle. And I don't know. Justice for my man Sal. You know, maybe he'll bring like Francesca Farrago as his date. We got to bring her back for another season. I love After the Altar. It is like it was just the perfect kind of icing on the cake of season 1, Love is Blind. So I have a feeling we will not be disappointed.
Yeah, me neither. It's going to be a lot of drama, and it's probably going to come in the summer, like Gianna said, because we know Netflix wants to release Love is Blind Season 3 later in the year. So that is everything we have to share with you guys today. So we want to hear your take on the Natalie and Shayne drama. Whose side are you guys on? Are you guys staying neutral? What are your predictions for After the Altar? Let us know what you guys think on all things Love is Blind in the comments down below. And before you go, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on any future Love is Blind updates. As always, I'm your host, Zachary Reality, joined by Gianna Gravalese and Allison Van Dam. Our social media handles are on the screen right now, so be sure to give us a follow. Come say hello. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.